Few are taught the fundamentals of finance and money management in school. This limited series podcast tackles the basics all students need to know to become financially independent, made by students for students. On this episode, we sat down with Kate Stapleton. Kate is a blockchain developer, hacker, and community organizer. She's also the vice president of the Blockchain Education Network. Welcome to episode 9 of the Money Class podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Money Class podcast. My name is Costa.
Hey guys, it's Mark.
And today we have a guest on the show. It's Kate Stapleton. You want to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Hey guys, so my name is Kate Stapleton. I'm the vice president of the Blockchain Education Network. We're a global network of university clubs that offer blockchain, fintech, and cryptocurrency courses. I also work for a startup in Toronto called Axelar. It's a blockchain startup working to scale cross-chain communications. So yeah, that's what I do.
And what do you guys? You said and you said with cross-chain communication scale. That what is that? What does that mean exactly?
So a lot of people look at the blockchain industry, and because the products that we're building right now are so advanced, they think that we've got it all figured out. But I like to kind of compare the blockchain landscape right now to the internet landscape back in the 80s. So everything is very siloed. So blockchain A, so like the Ethereum blockchain, blockchain B, like the Bitcoin blockchain, they don't talk to each other, right? So there's no cross-chain protocols that allow any of these chains to talk to each other. So what we're doing at the startup that I'm involved in is we're trying to fix that. We're trying to create kind of network-wide protocols that will allow all of these chains to talk to each other, kind of like HTTP and HTTPS that you find on the internet. So standardized protocols so that things can, so that chains can communicate.
Okay, so this means that if you have, if you have a wallet with Ethereum and you have a wallet with Bitcoin, you're able to kind of do transactions between both wallets as opposed to kind of take money out and then put money back in. Is that right? Because they're siloed.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Because right now, to exchange money, there's a few ways that the chains can talk, right? You can go through exchanges if you want to exchange your Bitcoin for Ethereum. Some other solutions that exist right now are bridges and wrapped assets. And again, these are kind of band-aid fixes. So what we're trying to do is create protocols that allow every chain to seamlessly communicate because they're all using the same network protocols that are standardized like we have with the internet. So we're trying to kind of bring what we've done with the internet with, as I've said, with HTTP, HTTPS, and apply that to the blockchain landscape so that things and chains and all these companies can communicate with each other.
Okay, so it's pretty much streamlining the entire process. That makes sense. Gosta, what were you going to say? Sorry?
Yeah, before we jump right into blockchain, I just want to know why you got involved in this world. What made you, why are you interested in it?
So my background is in cybersecurity. That's how I kind of got into tech. And with that, I started to hear about this really cool thing called Bitcoin a few years ago. And I was on a mailing list, and that's actually where the white paper was posted. So it was the cypherpunk mailing list. And so there'd been a few attempts to kind of do what Bitcoin has done. Back in the 90s, there was, DigiCash and eGold. And so this wasn't kind of a new phenomenon, but no one had done it well. Nobody had been able to actually create a set of standards and make a Bitcoin-like application that worked. And so with Bitcoin, it was the first one that took off, right? It was completely decentralized and it was trustless, which was kind of the factor that set it apart from all the failed attempts back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so from my background in cybersecurity, I was hearing talk about Bitcoin, and I really wanted to play around with it. And so I downloaded the software. I started running a miner, which at the time you could do with your computer, right? There's been a few hops, so you could mine Bitcoin with your computer, and then there was a hop to using GPU. And then now there's ASIC miners their sole purpose is to mine Bitcoin.
It's like a little computer that just mines, right? As opposed to using
literally
your computer,
a piece of hardware. Yeah, so it's a piece of hardware. All it does is mine Bitcoin, and it's its one purpose. Because the computing power is so great right now to mine Bitcoin that you can't do it with your computer, or even with back in the day like your Xbox, your PlayStation. You need an application-specific piece of hardware. But so with Bitcoin, it was obviously from a cryptography standpoint really fascinating, but it didn't kind of catch my interest because there was only one application for it, right? It was a purely financial application. And then when Ethereum came along, that's when I became really interested in the blockchain space. Because with Ethereum, what you could now do was build things. So Ethereum is Turing complete, Bitcoin is Turing incomplete because it does one thing. Whereas with Ethereum, now you could build things like decentralized apps. You could, mint your own tokens, create your own currency. And so with the onset of Ethereum, that's when I really kind of transitioned from cybersecurity into blockchain because I saw the future of it. And I also saw the ability to be able to build things, which I found really cool. And 4 years later, here we are.
Okay, I see. So, now we're talking about Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I know there's like a bunch of other like coins, whatever you want to call them. There's like thousands, I think, probably.
Coin, yeah.
Right, yeah. And with that being said, like, what's the main difference between every single one of them? Why are people so attracted to, let's say, a Bitcoin or an Ethereum compared to maybe like a Litecoin or XRP? I know there are a bunch of them, but yeah.
Yeah, Ripple, whatever. There's so many of them. How could a person choose, like, say I want to get into Bitcoin? Is it a question of, what application am I looking for? So, I want commission-free stock trading, so I'm going to go to Robinhood, right? So that's easy, but there's 1,000 other trading apps. Is that kind of the same thing with the cryptos?
Yeah, so the difference between them, so some coins are built on their very own blockchain, right? So you have Bitcoin, which is its own blockchain. You have Ethereum, which is its own blockchain. You also have Monero, which is a privacy coin. And so all of these larger coins, they're built on their very own proprietary blockchain. What you can also do with Ethereum is mint ERC20s. That's the token standard. So you can create your own token. So if you wanted, you could go and pull up the Ethereum virtual machine just from your desktop, and you can mint your own token. So there's differences between tokens because some are hosted on their own native blockchain, some are built on the Ethereum blockchain or built on other blockchains because a lot of these blockchains allow you to build dApps, decentralized applications, and from there you can also mint tokens. So the main difference is essentially what you want out of that coin, right? So with Bitcoin, it's the oldest, it's the most well-known, it's the most robust, right? It's kind of leading the charge in terms of taking the hits in terms of regulation and all that. So people know it, there's name recognition, it's also worth the most. Ethereum is kind of twofold because Ether is what you pay your gas fees in. And so when you're building on the Ethereum network, you're charged gas fees to deploy contracts. So that way you're incentivized to run really good code. So you're not just pushing junk code and backing up the network. So you can pay your gas fees in Ether. And there's also the cryptocurrency. So those are two separate things. Ethereum is kind of the second largest cryptocurrency. It's pretty well known. It's got a very robust ecosystem of builders who've built applications on the network. There's something like, a Monero, which is a privacy coin. So with Bitcoin, you can see where any funds have been sent from and where they've been sent to. Whereas with Monero, you can't track that.
Because it's privacy, because it's a privacy coin.
Exactly, yeah. And right now with the onset of DeFi, which is just decentralized finance, and so typically what people call coins that are not Bitcoins are altcoins, alternative coins. Yeah. And so with the onset of DeFi, you've been seeing the altcoins really pick up in value. And with the onset of that, a really popular coin now is like Tether, right? Or USDT. It's stable coins. So you have a cryptocurrency that's pegged one-to-one to a fiat asset, like the US dollar. There's a euro version of it. And so it's really what do you want to do with the cryptocurrency, right? There's also tokens that are just meant for voting. So if you're part of a decentralized autonomous organization, you buy some of this, or you're allocated some of this specific token, and that allows you to vote on proposals that are passed, and that's how they're passed.
Kind of like when you go to a fair. Kind of like when you go to a fair and you get a ticket. Like that ticket is worth nothing except at the fair. This coin is worth nothing except for that voting. Is that did I get that right?
Yeah, and so there is value to these tokens, right? Like there's a bunch of like governance tokens that there is actual like real world value to them. And so you can trade them, as you would any other token, but their purpose is for governance is to vote. So it's really what do you want to do with, what do you want to do with this coin? If you look at Ripple, if you look at Litecoin, those are more institution kind of targeted coins. Ripple obviously is undergoing a pretty substantial lawsuit with the SEC right now. They're saying that it should be classified as a security. So yeah, it's really what you want to do with the currency and how you want to use it is kind of how you can go about it.
You
Okay,
mentioned.
and you mentioned. Okay,
Go ahead,
that's cool.
Mark.
You mentioned gas fees. What were those? You mentioned it quickly. What are is that when you make a coin you have like to pay a fee to the underwriter or what is a gas fee?
So a gas fee, those exist. That term is for Ethereum, and so Ethereum is a platform, right? It's a platform to build whatever you can imagine on the Ethereum network. And to do so, you have to, you write smart contracts, you write code, and you have to kind of publish that code, deploy the code. And to do so, what Ethereum does is it charges you a gas fee. And a gas fee incentivizes builders and developers to only deploy really good code. So clean code, code that's going to be working, code that's not full of bugs and doesn't have to be audited and all that. So that it incentivizes the network to stay running, to stay up, to stay running, and to be really functional. So you pay, say I write a smart contract that creates, a voting system, and I deploy it. I have to pay gas to deploy it and publish it to mainnet on the Ethereum virtual machine.
So the better your code, the lesser the fee. Is that right?
So it's a standardized fee.
Okay.
So it's not when I say standard, everyone pays the same thing. The gas fees do fluctuate. Since the summer, they've been very, very high. So to send, Ethereum to people's wallets and to deploy these contracts can be very, very expensive as of late. So everyone pays the same fee, and that fee can fluctuate, but that fee is meant to incentivize you. Since you're paying to deploy this code, you want it to be the best version of that code possible.
Okay, it's like when you put in a trade. Let's say you're trading on the markets, on the stock markets. If you're spending $5 to put a trade, you're not going to be putting 50 trades a day because that's just going to eat up your profits. Same idea here. You're not going to put in a lot of crap code into the world because you're paying a fee and you don't just have that to do all day, right? But then could you make money and make royalties when someone uses your code, or once you put it out there, it's open source, anyone has access to it?
So with Ethereum, it's open source, right? Like it's a public blockchain, right? And deploying the code, it can do whatever you want, right? So if this code is meant to deploy an application that people are going to use, you can make money through the use of that application. If you're launching a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO, right? So an organization that lives on the blockchain. So all of the voting is done by the blockchain, everything that the organization decides on, and everything is recorded. You can make money through that. So in a roundabout way, your code can make you money if your organization in the entity that it's meant to create is successfall.
Now I want to go back a bit to what you mentioned about regulation. There's been a lot of talks about basically Bitcoin and people are worried that there at some point in time the government is going to come in and kind of regulate this entire world just because they can't really do anything about it and they have no power. Hence why it's decentralized versus something centralized like the US dollar, for example, where the government loves to track where their money's going with the banks. So what would be the solution there? Do you think the government will regulate it? Do you think they're going to ban it? How would it work? What are your thoughts?
Well, so that's the interesting thing about cryptocurrency is that you've seen, before a few years ago and even recently, you have governments that are like, well, we don't understand it. We're very much struggling to regulate it because it's a decentralized currency. It is not beholden or controlled by one country, one government, and you can value it against fiat or against other cryptos, but its value is inferred by its kind of real world applications and use cases. And so you have governments that are, have tried to ban it. They'll say, the use of cryptocurrency is banned, but
they can't really ban it. They could just they could censor the websites, but there's always new websites coming up, right?
It's largely for show, because essentially, if somebody has access to the internet, they have access to cryptocurrency, right? So unless you're North Korea and you take down the internet, people, are still gonna be able to use it. You can ban companies from accepting it, right? You can ban companies from trading in it, from dealing in it, and you can ban companies, cryptocurrency or blockchain-based companies from incorporating, right? In your country. but there's no way to stop access, because as I said, if you have access to the internet, then you have access to cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And so now what you're seeing is, I think the government is finally kind of picking up on that. So rather than saying, well, we're just going to ban it, cryptocurrencies, it's illegal, nobody can trade, nobody can receive them or send them to others. Rather than doing that, they're actually kind of really now trying to regulate them. So it's kind of like, well, we can't ban this. This is a reality that we're going to have to live with. How do we regulate it? How do we control it? And every government has different approaches, right? In the United States, they're trying very hard to regulate it. Over in the UK, right, they're making very concerted efforts to kind of globally regulate currency. And there's no one answer. I wish I could just say like, well, this is how we should do it, but it's a very complicated topic, because this is a technology that we've not seen before, right? This is a very and it develops daily, right? With the onset of DeFi, decentralized finance, there's an incredible amount of interest, and there's a credible amount of money that's being poured into these coins. I mean, you look at these companies that before, large hedge fund and large portfolio companies, they're getting into Bitcoin, right? That's part of why the price pumped up to 52,000 Canadian, is because you have all of this kind of mainstream adoption and interest in this. So I mean, personally, I think it's like any other regulation. It should be done on a country by country basis. There's a lot of folks, who feel that cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and all that, it shouldn't be regulated. But for me, I think we need to be a little bit more intellectually honest and say, if we really want mass adoption and we really want this, technology to scale and for people to use it, then we have to realize that the only way that's going to happen is if there's some regulation, right?
Yeah.
Would I love this to be... Pardon?
Yeah. No, continue. I was going to give a point to that, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, would I love this to continue as the Wild Wild West? Sure. But we're only going to get so far if there's absolutely no regulation and there's absolutely no kind of work with cooperation, I'd say, like with the communities, right? With the blockchain community and governments. We're just going to kind of plateau and be sidelined. So,
Yeah. Because theoretically, so like let's say there's a wealth tax that's imposed into very wealthy people. This is something that happens already within some countries in the EU. It's something that's being played around here in the States, which probably won't. And it's a different story, but it's an idea to have to tax someone's wealth, right? And someone, I guess, could transfer their wealth, their US dollars or whatever dollar they want, or whatever currency they want, into a privacy coin, which they could then put into these hedge funds, which are accepting it, and all of a sudden their wealth is like nowhere to be seen anymore. And I think that could be a big, that's almost like a roadblock to the adoption of Bitcoin, because then it's like, who's actually frauding the government, frauding the other people, and it creates like a stigma between, or a stigma around this, because people are using it for tax evasion, right? Which I guess is a possible application for it right now, as unethical as it may be.
Yeah, I mean, any financial crime that existed pre-Bitcoin, pre-blockchain is going to continue to exist after Bitcoin and blockchain. The argument at the earlier days was, well, Bitcoin, the only reason people have Bitcoin is to buy drugs. And I'm like, well, people were buying drugs before Bitcoin. They're going to continue to buy drugs, during and maybe one day after Bitcoin. So people are going to, if there's an opportunity to commit crime, people are going to find and exploit that opportunity.
But technology scales anything you could do, right? If now you don't have to have a physical amount of US dollars, you can now use Bitcoin, which is a scalable asset, not asset, but it's a scalable currency, right? Because you can mine it. There's always money that's coming in. Granted, the Federal Reserve also prints a lot of money, but you can mine it, and there's more demand of it. You can acquire more of it, and because it's through technology, the scalability is infinite.
Well, so the interesting thing with Bitcoin is that, so depending on the coin, some have a capped supply and some have an uncapped supply. So like Ethereum, like there's an uncapped supply, right? Because the idea is that people are going to continually be building on the network, are continually, going to be deploying code and building. So there's an uncapped supply, but with Bitcoin, there's a capped supply. So there's a fixed supply. So only 21 million Bitcoin will ever exist. And so the way that Bitcoins are created, when you buy a Bitcoin, right, when you go to an exchange and you're like, I want to buy, 5 Bitcoin, those Bitcoins are not...
You got to be pretty wealthy for that.
Pardon?
You're gonna have to have quite a bit of money for that.
At today's prices, yeah, you're doing pretty well. But so those 5 coins, they're not minted for your transaction. They're sourced, so they already exist. So the only time that Bitcoins are minted is when a miner successfully adds another block to the blockchain. And so so essentially, there's every 10 minutes, all the transactions are kind of put into a block. They're hashed together in a block. And the miners on the network, their sole job is to solve that hash. So a hash is a complex, combination of numbers and letters. And so all of the miners in the world that are mining the Bitcoin blockchain, they're trying to solve that hash. And the first one who solves it, they submit the equation and what their result to the network, which is called proof of work. And then all the other networks on the miners on the network are like, okay, 1 + 1, it does equal 2. You were the first one to solve this, to solve the hash, and they're rewarded in Bitcoin. And so that acts to further, the blockchain, so that every 10 minutes a new batch of transactions, a block is added. And it also incentivizes people to mine, because there's a huge amount of computing power that's needed currently to mine Bitcoin. And so without that incentive, why would people spend thousands and thousands of dollars a month on electricity? Because there's a possibility to be rewarded in Bitcoin. And so that's how Bitcoins are minted, is the one miner that solves the equation first are rewarded in Bitcoin. And every 4 years, that reward it's called a block reward. It's halved.
Okay, it's halved. Okay, wow.
Okay, I just want to go back again to one thing you're saying so much. It's so good. But about the whole thing about the government's regulating everything and just kind of making it more mainstream. There's been a lot of talk about how, let's say, the U.S. government, the Canadian government, the German or the Japanese government, there's no point for them necessarily to have something like Bitcoin when their money is pretty solid, more or less, right? But countries maybe like Venezuela or Somalia, or even there were talks in Greece where Greece is in a lot of shit, to say the least, over the last decade because of the debts and everything. In 2015, they wanted to adopt something like the Bitcoin, or a lot of people were removing their money from the banks and basically putting it all in Bitcoin so they can save themselves from what was happening there. Like, what do you think of that? Is it true to say that it will become a lot more mainstream and legitimate in those countries where governments are unstable and where it can actually become something more stable for them? Like, how would you see it?
Yeah, so there's actually a pretty interesting kind of, I would say, trend of governments. Like you said, Venezuela, for example, right? Their financial system, completely collapsed. And so they were the first country to actually have their official currency be a cryptocurrency.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's actually, what is the name of it? I think it's the, I'll remember it as we talk, probably in 15 minutes it'll come to me. But yeah, so they've created, so their official currency is a cryptocurrency, right? Because as we know, their financial system just completely collapsed, and so traditional finances and traditional banking just it didn't work for the country.
The petro.
Pardon?
The petro. Is that it? Petro. I think so. Petro moneda. Launching. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
so that's their their official currency. And you also see interesting developments, like in China, they're introducing digital yen. And so I think with the hype of blockchain and the hype of Bitcoin, especially with all the markets, Bitcoin and all the altcoins pumping, we kind of lose sight of some of the real kind of human applications of this technology, right? I've done a lot of work in Africa. And a lot of my work is centered around, well, how do we meaningfully, bank the under and unbanked, which is what we've been trying to do forever. And so taking, the opportunities in blockchain technology and applying it, because the issue is that, right, to get a bank account, well, you need a form of ID. And if you're from, a rural area, you don't necessarily have a form of ID. You don't even necessarily have a birth certificate. And some African nations, there's no national identification system, right? There's no health card, there's no driver's license, there's no national identity. So, from there, it's kind of a domino effect, right? You don't have a piece of ID, well, then you can't get a bank account. You can't get a bank account, well, you can't, start to build credit, and you can't have that form of, identification. And also, if you're living in a rural area, you have to get to a bank. There's no ATMs, outside of city centers. There's no banks really outside of city centers. And so people have been really kind of really ingenious. And so that's where you found the onset of mobile money. So M-Pesa, which came out of Kenya, it's a way to now text money to your friends, your family, to pay, any bills or your staff. So you go to your local corner store, you give them $5, $10. The KYC, right, is that they know you and they know your account. They add that to your account, and now you can text money to your family back home. You can text money to pay your bills. You can text money to pay your employees. It's completely bankless, right? And so with cryptocurrency, there's that opportunity as well to come in and bypass the traditional systems that aren't serving these folks, right? That were not designed for them, and really can't be retrofitted to help them out. And so adding something like, a Bitcoin option alongside, the ability to send mobile money, or one step further, adding a USDT option, because everyone always wants to be paid in US dollars across Africa. And so rather than, having to procure US dollars, if you add, a USDT option, so you can buy and send USDT, which is a stable coin that's pegged 1-to-1 to the US dollar, now you're kind of bypassing the traditional financial system that doesn't serve these folks, and you're onboarding them seamlessly into the global cryptocurrency economy. So there's a lot of opportunity to really meaningfully bank under and unbanked communities. And so I think a lot more focus should be put onto that, rather than, the price of Bitcoin is pumping, or like, all these altcoins, let's make some money trading in DeFi. And I think if we get that right, there's 3 billion folks who don't have access to the internet. If we can allow Bitcoin to be sent over SMS, well, now you've just, unlocked a whole new market. You can now have 3 billion people who can send and receive and hold cryptocurrency. So there's a lot of really interesting opportunities that exist if we just kind of step back and have a more global perspective when it comes to blockchain.
It's interesting because I thought I'd never used any type of cryptocurrencies until you just brought something up, and it's something that I've actually have used without even knowing it. While I was in Singapore at the first half of the year, they have these top-up cards. I'm completely forgetting the name, but it's like you go to your local convenience store and you have you put money into your SIM card, right? And it's through your phone number, so you say, this is my number, and you give them, a $10 bill, or, whatever, you give them a certain dollar amount, and then that goes into your SIM card. And then that SIM card is attributed to another card, which you could use for anything, whether it be paying for your phone bills, but also taking the metro, to paying it at a restaurant. So it's pretty much a cryptocurrency, at least a form of it through these carriers, pretty much, which you could use to make transactions without actually having physical dollars. So it was interesting because I thought I never used it, and then all of a sudden you're bringing this up, and I'm like, wait a second, I have used a cryptocurrency, and it opens up to all these people that don't have a traditional bank account.
And that's how you kind of do cryptocurrency and blockchain right, is that you have the user experience be so seamless and so akin to, regular experiences of loading up your, banking, like, pulling up your CIBC app, putting money in there. Sorry, I know, sorry just to bring up CIBC, that's just where I bank.
Represent.
Yeah.
You just reload your credit card or your bank account, and you could use that. So go ahead.
So that's really how you, as I said, you do cryptocurrency and blockchain, you do it well. Because the whole, if you've spent a minute in the cryptocurrency or the blockchain world, one of the topics, apart from DeFi and apart from pumping and all that and going to the moon, it's adoption. How do we foster mass adoption? And I would argue that the blockchain technology that we want folks to adopt, it has to be in the back end, right? You should be able to interact and to use a product without realizing that it's blockchain. Because, especially in this space, we have what I call our like blockchain blinders, is we're like, oh, this technology is so cool. Like, I want to kind of show off what I can do with it. And we tend to put blockchain on the front end and kind of shove it in your face. But regular users still can't wrap their head around Bitcoin. And so telling them that this is like a blockchain powered, decentralized, you've already lost them. So the way that you do it right is you have it running, powering and decentralizing the back end. And then the front end is the same user experience that you would expect with any other app, like a banking app, or like a PayPal, or any sort of money or even non-financial app that people are used to using in their everyday lives.
Well, you mentioned right there you mentioned PayPal, and I do know, like, I think PayPal or even Square, they're like making it accessible for like the everyday person nowadays. Or like I know Coinbase and even places like Gemini, they're introducing debit cards, and I know there are credit cards out there where you can basically pay or like get paid in Bitcoin through the reward system. So is that a way of kind of making it more, make it feel more like a bank or like something people are used to?
Yeah, so Visa, for a long time, they've had a credit card and a debit card that's Bitcoin compatible. And so, yeah, you're seeing a lot of bridging of kind of the traditional financial world now marrying and kind of figuring out how to adopt blockchain technology, be it on the back end or on the front end. So you can, rather than going to exchanges, you can just kind of convert your fiat to Bitcoin very quickly, like with one of these cards. And yeah, there's really interesting applications that are coming out. I mean, some of these, the fees are exorbitantly high, right? You have to stake to be able to receive the card, which, regular people aren't going to do. But I think the more we can kind of take things that people are comfortable with and used to and kind of integrate quietly blockchain into it, or just have the option, if you want to pay in fiat or blockchain, you can do it all with this card. That's also what's going to, push adoption, is convenience, right? Because this is the blockchain community. This is where we get it wrong, is we're so passionate about the technology. We don't realize that Bitcoin is not a selling point for people. The fact that it's powered by Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, it allows you to buy and sell or hold cryptocurrency. That's a turnoff for most people because they don't understand the technology. And so they're going to go with something that they understand. And so, we're so focused on blockchain. We think it's so cool, but it needs to be on the back end because it confuses a lot of people, and people are, they're convenience motivated, right? So if there's even one extra step to use something that's, powered by blockchain rather than what they're used to, there's no incentive for them to switch. Even if the technology is really cool and it's decentralized and it's, sensor resistant, they don't care. They want something that's going to work, that they understand, and that's convenient for them. So when we're designing products, we really have to look, there's this whole like, oh, well, it's, I've seen it hackathons all the time. Well, it's like Uber, but blockchain powered. I'm like, but Uber works. Why are you reinventing the wheel here? People like Uber, And so we need to design blockchain products inspired by the real world scaled products that they're meant to kind of compete with or replace, or be used in tandem with, in my opinion.
Yeah, because if you go to the bank right now, you want to do a wire transfer, it's going to cost you $40, $45. It's an expensive way of transferring money. Whereas using a cryptocurrency or one at which utilizes blockchain would make it safer, as safe as probably doing it through the banks, but also remove a lot of the fees, making it more convenient for everyone else. Right? So I think that's really the value proposition, is when you start allowing people to use it in a way that they don't even think they're about the way that they don't even think that they're using it, kind of like my experience in Singapore, where I didn't even think about how I was using cryptocurrencies because it was so seamless, and no one explained to me the blockchain network and the how this was being done in the back end. They just said, go to the convenience store, top up your card, and then use it at your local hawker center or when you take the MRT.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also it's how you foster trust, right? Because this is a new technology. It's a very disruptive technology in terms of kind of disrupting all the industries that it touches. And so a big thing to adoption is trust. Users need to know, okay, I can trust, they know that they can trust Visa, they know they can trust PayPal and all of these kind of larger, and they can trust their banks, right? If your card is frauded, you're going to get the money back, right? You lose your debit card, they're going to send you another debit card. That's another issue with blockchain, issue or opportunity, is that, wherever you store your Bitcoin, your wallet, it's backed up by a mnemonic seed phrase. So it's a collection of 16 words. And if you lose that, there's no support to call, right? And so you see like the guy, I think it was
the $220 million.
$20 million, yeah, locked away. He's got two more guesses. And, even the company that issued the hardware wallets, like, we can't, our products are designed to do what we say they do. And so you're really taking your banking and your finances into your own hands. So that's at once empowering and liberating, but it comes with the trade-off of using a centralized system like banking, like traditional banking institutions, where if you lose your card, you forget your password, where you can just call customer service and they'll reset it. With Bitcoin, you have autonomy over your finances, but that comes with the responsibility of managing your private keys and your passwords. And if you lose them, there's $220 million that not only are you not going to be able to access, it's locked away and it's gone. So there's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies that are just lost forever, right? They're going to sit there for the end of time because somebody was mining them on their hard drive. They threw the hard drive away. 10 years later, Bitcoin is worth $52,000. And they're like, oh, I probably had a couple $100 million of Bitcoin on that, on that server. Now it's, it's parts.
No, it's gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's
in the
It's
government,
an interesting prospect.
so the government has something like the CDIC. I know the states have the same thing where they can insure, I think, up to $100,000 or $250,000 per like account you have with like any institution. Would the only solution, I guess, be for people who own Bitcoin, like a two-step authenticator, or putting it on like an actual key where they could like store that somewhere safe?
Yeah, so obviously 2FA enabled on everything is not just good practice for, for anything cryptocurrency related. It's good to have, across your devices. And also what people do is because a lot of the times, like, the guy who lost his seed phrase, it was literally printed on a piece of paper and he threw the piece of paper away years ago and now I can't remember it. So you can get your private key engraved onto like a piece of metal so that even if your house burns down, you still have it. So there are ways to properly manage your keys. Printing it on a piece of paper and like putting it in a cupboard is not not a good way. Having it written down in multiple places is also good. But yeah, it is on you to keep track of all your passwords and to manage your accounts. And you also need to use exchanges, wallets, and services that you trust, because if you've been following DeFi at all, there's been a bunch of hacks, right? And so the account or the exchange can be hacked and you can lose your money. And so there is opportunity there to perhaps get the money back because you can go through the exchange. It's not
And use the blockchain to find where it was routed, type of thing.
Pardon?
And then use the blockchain to find that transaction that you made, and then re-find your. You said you could go through the exchange and find your money again, right?
Well, so what you're seeing is people will hack exchanges and then take money out. And so if that's the case, you would have to rely on the exchange doing their due diligence or being insured or being able to, reimburse you for the money that was stolen. There's, even with Ledger is, they have physical hardware. So it's a physical offline wallet, and they were hacked. And so people's funds weren't affected, but the hackers published thousands of folks, personally identifying information. So their full names, where they lived, their email addresses, their phone numbers, all that. So you do have to kind of take extra steps to secure your data and to secure your coins. And so using third-party services like exchanges, that adds another kind of layer of uncertainty and another opportunity for people to come in and steal your funds.
Because if I recall, you had mentioned that you could keep your money. You shouldn't keep your cryptos into an exchange. Keep it inside a wallet, which is protected, because the exchange can be hacked.
Exactly. So the expression in crypto is not your keys, not your crypto. So your private key is what unlocks a transaction. So your public key is kind of where you can think of it as where people will send Bitcoin to, right? And so that's public. It's like your that's the QR code that you can scan and send money to. And so that's public. So that's your public key, and your private key is known only to you, and that's what unlocks it. But with an exchange, if you're using a third party, they hold the private keys, and so it's not your key. And so if they get hacked, it's no longer your crypto either. So
it's kind of like I guess a physical comparison would be, you go to a little exchange, you put money on the table, and someone else is going to come pick it up, and you guys have a certain agreement. But until that money's not inside your pocket, it's not actually 100% yours, right? So during the time that you're doing the exchange, you are vulnerable to hackers, you're vulnerable to thieves. But it's still the best place to do the exchange, because you're not going to take money from someone's pocket, put it in your pocket. You're going to go through the actual third party. And I think that's where stock exchanges have a certain regulation, because they're more regulated, at least by federal institutions. That won't happen, or at least that won't happen as often, at least on stock exchanges. But on the cryptocurrencies, because it's still early, there's still opportunities for fraudulent activities. because like you said, it's kind of, there's still the Wild West, or it's still being developed, and becoming mainstream.
Well, and especially with DeFi, that's largely built on Ethereum. And so this is, people are writing code and committing code and deploying code. And the issue is that they're not properly auditing it. Not only that, they're not testing it. And so you had I forget the name of the exchange, but they were hacked, I think, over the Christmas break. And the hackers stole, a couple $1 million worth of Ethereum, changed it into another. Pardon?
Pocket change.
Yeah, exactly. Change it into another, transferred it into another coin, and then returned it with a note that said, "Next time, deal with your own shit." So, the issue is that you have people writing code and launching exchanges and swaps that are responsible for handling millions and millions of dollars of folks' money, and the code isn't written properly. It's not audited, right? And the people using it aren't savvy enough to read through the code and say, okay, there's a bug here, this is weak, this is, this should look like this. And so they're trusting these exchanges, and the exchanges haven't done the work on their part to test the code, to audit the code, and to make sure that it's, as bulletproof as possible. And so again, it's early days, right? Bitcoin, the first transaction ever sent on the Bitcoin network was sent 12 years ago, I think 3 or 4 days ago. And so we're competing against legacy institutions, but people do need to realize that it's a new technology, because before Ethereum came along, Bitcoin was only financial. So you weren't even building things like dApps, and you had no exchanges and stuff like that. So it's a new industry. It's moving at lightning speed, at kind of a breakneck pace. I would argue that there's not really any other industry that's existed that's moved as fast as the blockchain industry and as crypto has. And so with that, there's a lot of innovation. There's also a lot of errors that we're making.
You mentioned hackers here, and I do know that there's always going to be that issue as time goes on. It's always going to be there, and with the introduction of quantum computing and everything, there's always going to be it's essentially going to be a race. That's how I see it, right? A race for them to be just upping up their security, and then the hackers just getting better at it, and then just, you know what I mean? Is that how it's going to be forever, though? Do you see any other solutions other than that?
I mean, I think that's kind of the way that technology in general works, right? With Bitcoin, the security of the network comes from the fact that you would have to control 51% of the network to be able to force a fraudulent transaction through. And so when you have a decentralized network, that makes it incredibly hard, because you have millions and millions of nodes, of connected devices all over the world. And so because it's decentralized, getting control of 51% of that network is arguably, nothing is set in stone, but it's arguably almost impossible. However, with the onset of quantum computing, that introduces another kind of factor that we when it was built wasn't considered, right? When this technology was being built back in, whenever it was, 2007, 2008, or earlier, we don't know. No one was thinking of quantum computing. Nobody had that, as a kind of a threat vector in their mind. And so with the onset of new technology like quantum computing, that introduces the possibility to potentially be able to execute a 51% attack. And so now, rather than proof of work, right, which the Bitcoin blockchain is based on, there's all sorts of other models like proof of stake, right? So rather than all these nodes competing to solve one problem, your node on the network, you stake money to have that node on the network. And so your incentive is not to be, you do get rewarded if you're the one to kind of confirm a batch of transactions.
But you don't want to hack it because it's your money.
Exactly. You have skin in the game because you staked, a significant amount of that currency, so that if you push through a fraudulent transaction, you'll get slashed. So you'll lose all that money. So there's new models that are emerging as kind of the market dictates, right? Because with Bitcoin, there's a huge amount of energy that's being used up. And so moving forward, that's not sustainable, especially for a network like Ethereum that's kind of has the ability to grow exponentially. So now with ETH2, they've moved from they're moving from a proof of work model to a proof of stake model. There's also consensus models. There's all sorts of different models that have kind of emerged in response to the proof of work model being a little bit outdated and not necessarily scaling to the levels that we needed to. Because Bitcoin, it can't compete with Visa, right? And so we need a product that's going to be able to compete with Visa. So arguably ETH2 will be able to compete with the Visa in terms of transactions per second. But again, it's always evolving. As there's threats, there's going to be technology that arises and is developed to address those threats. And yeah, the sky's kind of the limit, So I think it will always be a little bit of an arms race between kind of competing technologies, but that's the nature of technology itself, I would say.
Okay, well,
interesting.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead. No. What are you gonna say?
Oh, I just want to say we have to wrap up the podcast in a bit, just because we're in a bit of a time crunch. But Mark, unless you have another question specifically about Bitcoin, I want to talk about something else.
No, nothing particular. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, with everything you just said, for those who are really interested in Bitcoin right now, do you have any people, like certain personalities on YouTube or on the internet, that you would recommend for them to check out so they can learn more about this whole world? Is there someone who inspired you, maybe a book or a movie or TV show? Let them know.
Yeah, so I mean, shameless self-plug. The VP, I'm the VP of, as I said, the Blockchain Education Network. And so our whole mission is to educate folks. We're chain agnostic, and we're more kind of real education focused rather than teaching people how to trade. That's not what we focus on at all. We focus on the technology, understanding its applications, its use cases, how to build it, if that's the direction you want to go. So if you check out learn.blockchainedu.org, that's our decentralized wiki. So we have articles on a bunch of different projects, a bunch of different coins. We have an intro to Bitcoin, intro to Ethereum, cryptography lessons. So anything that you want to learn kind of on the topic of blockchain, we have either lessons, tutorials. So we have our own content. We also have linked content from other sources that we vetted and deemed as really, really high quality. So it's kind of it's a wiki kind of giving you a crash course in all things blockchain. So again, it's learn.blockchainedu.org. For if you're a business student, a developer, a hobbyist, there's content there for you to work through.
I just took note of it, so we'll have it inside the video description, inside the description of the podcast as well. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of content on learn.blockchainedu.org, so it looks pretty good, and it's, like you said, it's anyone could contribute to it. Like if I start understanding new things, and is there like a Reddit type forum as well where I could exchange with other blockchain enthusiasts?
Yeah, so the way it works is that if you're a Ben member, so if you sign up, you join Ben, you are able to create an account. And Ben, before it was only for university students who belong to a Bitcoin club or a blockchain club, but we're kind of expanding our definition of student, to fit with 2021 and the changing, landscape of everything. So if you sign up to become a Ben member, anyone can read through, anyone can access it. That's completely free. But in order to contribute to it, you would sign up to become a Ben member, and then you would get the login information to be able to add to it as well. And so the people who have contributed to it is kind of the core team, so the Ben International team. I've written a few lessons. Students will also publish their lessons, their tutorials, their research papers. We also have professors in our network and in labs who have also contributed content. So anyone can access it. It's free for everyone. You can also teach it, right? If you want to take that lesson and then teach it to your community or teach it to your club. But to contribute, you have to be a Ben member.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think I would urge anyone anyone who's listening to this is probably interested, and if you made it this far out, I urge you to become a member of Ben and learn more about it. And it's always good to continue and pursue it, and to broaden the perspective of people who may not know about it. So it's whether it be talking talking about cryptos and blockchain to friends and family, and just spreading the word out. I think it's important. Everyone has a a duty to take what they know and spread it and share it with people. And this is a really great platform where you could do it. But I guess it's not just limited to doing it online and obviously in a group of people who are interested, but to do it with anyone else who may have an interest or may not know that they may be interested in this field. So thank you for bringing that up, Kate.
Yeah, thanks for giving me a platform to talk about it.
With that, one final question from me, unless you both want to bring up anything else.
Go.
Okay, great.
Go ahead, Costa.
So the final question, we ask this to everyone who comes on the podcast, or at least I think it's going to become a trend. And like I said in the other one, it's something that inspired me from Tim Ferriss's podcast. If you could write something on a billboard for everyone to see, what would you write?
Buy Bitcoin.
There you go.
That would be my billboard.
Disclaimer.
Nothing else would get your attention, and then you'd be like, if you've never heard of Bitcoin, you would look it up. If you've been interested, you may take it as a sign to learn more. So it kind of serves a dual purpose.
That's great.
I love it. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end the podcast. Everyone, buy Bitcoin.
Buy Bitcoin.
Well, with that, we'd like to thank you for being on the Money Class podcast. This was great, super informative. I learned a lot about Bitcoin just listening to you. The link is going to be in the description for anyone who wants to know more. And with that, my name is Costa.
Yeah, it's Mark. It's Mark right here.
And we had Kate Stapleton on the show. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye, everyone. This has been episode 9 of the Money Class podcast. If you liked the episode, make sure to subscribe and follow the podcast. We release a new episode every single week. See you next week. Bye-bye.